Welcome back. Today I want to talk about what I believe is the greatest symphony that was written in the 20th century. It is, of course, Sibelius' Sixth Symphony, opus number 104 in D minor. Now, to convince you, not only have I got, I believe, some very strong arguments, I've also got 7 conductors and 7 different symphony orchestras to support my arguments. And I really hope that you will enjoy this video and discover, if you don't know it already, just a wonderful, wonderful piece of music. So where do we start? Okay, Sibelius was born in 1865 in Finland. So when he started writing this, or when it was first performed in 1923, because he wrote sketches and ideas back in 1914, but he got to work earnestly on it in around 1918, 1919, when he was finishing his Fifth Symphony, which is in fact very different and far more popular because of its amazing ending, I suppose. But we'll come back to the Fifth in a future video, because as you all know, I love Sibelius's music. So he's writing it between 1918 and 1919, and he's continuing right through to 1923. He was a very slow writer. He was supported by the Finnish government state financially, so I guess he had the feeling that he wasn't like Mozart, where he had to write 100 pieces of music a year in order to keep his family fed. But that did mean that he could spend the time to express his genius in ways that maybe he couldn't in a commercial environment. But I digress. The symphony is largely written in what they call the Dorian mode. Now, what does that mean, the Dorian mode? The Dorian mode means, well, imagine if you have a piano keyboard and you start on the note D and you go only playing the white notes from D to D. Well, that would be the Dorian mode. Instead of using the B flat, you just play the straight white notes. And this gives you a kind of old-fashioned feeling, a bit church-like feeling. And it gives you this feeling of not being happy and not being sad, sort of maybe intellectually melancholy. I don't know how you want to put it, but it has a very special tonality to it. It's very beautiful. But that isn't the very, very special thing. I want to take you back briefly, if I may, to my days of studying composition. When I left school, I went to study music composition at the Blackheath Conservatoire, and also later at Morley College of Music in London. Now, I wasn't a very good student. I didn't stay long, but I did stay long enough to witness prejudice against Sibelius. For a start, in my boarding school, we had a fantastic music teacher, but he wasn't a fan of Sibelius. I grew up loving Sibelius since my father bought me a wind-up gramophone when I was about 3 or 4 years old, lots of old records, and among them were some of Sibelius's music, the typical Finlandia, Karelia suite, that kind of music, the Swan of Tuonela, and maybe Symphony Number 2, which is rather long, and of course the beautiful Third Symphony, which I talked about in a previous video, so we'll put a link in there. So back to my student days, when I went for an interview for Blackheath Conservatoire, I remember a professor or someone saying to me, "My dear chap, who is your favourite composer? Who would you like to emulate?" And I said, "Well, my favourite composer is Jean Sibelius." And he went, "Ha ha ha, Sibelius, that's so romantic and nationalistic and old-fashioned. Oh my goodness, we'll knock that out of you." Well, here I am all these years later, and they haven't succeeded yet, although I do like very modern music. So what happened was, up to his Third Symphony and his violin concerto, Sibelius was writing in a much more, shall we say, classical, romantic environment. This is the style he had, and it's very, very beautiful. In fact, the violin concerto today is the most played violin concerto for young violinists, those who want to go on to a professional career. It used to always be the Tchaikovsky, but now it's the Sibelius violin concerto is the one they have to play. But after the third, he wrote the fourth symphony, and that's a kind of mysterious symphony, and you're kind of moving into different worlds. And by the fifth, he had really got his structures, his new idea, a new path going. But then, when he started on the sixth, he had a completely different way of working. And it was so modern and so incredible at the time. No one else in the world had ever done it, as far as I know. And yet it didn't sound crazy like the music that came from later on with the 12-note serialism and Alban Berg and Stockhausen, of course. So what happened when Stockhausen really got going around 1923-24, around when this was released, basically the intellectuals got together and said, this is the new music, this is the new age. But actually Sibelius was writing something which would last forever. So what was radically different about the sixth from the fifth or any other symphony that had ever been composed up to that date? In 1918, Sibelius would have had in his jacket pocket a chain, and on the end of that chain there would have been a pocket watch. And I want to use the analogy of the pocket watch to explain what was so special about his composition. Now, many years ago, I was driving home from work, and a BBC radio presenter called Anthony Hopkins had a program called Talking About Music, and he talked about Sibelius's Sixth Symphony. And if I remember correctly, because it was a very long time ago, I think he used this watch analogy, or certainly something similar. And over the years, I've developed the thoughts further, and I want to share them with you now, because having heard that radio program made me go home immediately and listen to the Sixth Symphony. I had it on record, never really played it, always only played the fifth. And once I listened to it, I thought, that's it. That's what's different. That's what makes it so amazing. And I had missed it before, just like so many other people. So here we go. Imagine this then, a pocket watch. You have a beautiful round face. Let's take an analogy of maybe the great symphony composers of history. Should we say Haydn? Wrote 104 of them. Let's just take the London Symphony in number 104 in D major. So it has a little slow movement, but then it goes into da-dee-da-dum, ba-da-dum-bum-bum-bum-ba-da, and that's the tune. And we all get the tune. We think, that's the tune. And the orchestra is going bum, 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 bum underneath to let this tune float all the way along. And then very cleverly, Haydn will develop that tune and invert it and change it. So it's a bit like this. So you see Haydn showing you the front face of the pocket watch, and you see it and you think, that's rather nice. And then, as in all sonata form, and I'm simplifying now, A, B, A, you see it at the front, and then in the B, the development section, he may get the theme and twist it and change it and develop the concept and theme further. And so it becomes more detailed, more dark, more mysterious, lighter, inverted, whatever, and turned and twisted round. And then you get through all of that middle section, and then the A section comes back, and you play more or less the same thing all over again. The tune comes back, everybody recognizes the tune again, and basically what you're doing is you're seeing the pocket watch, but you're seeing the face again, now understanding a little bit more about what's going on inside. So the development section is like opening up the front case and looking into all the little cogs and wheels inside the pocket watch. ABA. But what Sibelius has done, he's gone for a 4-movement symphony, which was completely standard by then. And instead of showing us the face, what he's doing is he's just showing you little bits of the face, maybe one of the numbers, or a little part of a decoration of a little bit of enamel, or maybe just the pointer, the little arrowhead on one of the hands, or zooming in on a bit of the little second hand ticking round. And he's just showing you lots of different little bits. And then he's opening that case and he's showing you all little bits of inside, but it's all happening at once. Nothing is going along in the normal way. There's no melody with a pa pa background. No, there's just little bits. And even when there are melodies, which there are, trust me, stick with the program, you won't sometimes know whether the bit you're hearing that sounds like the melody, is that the main melody, or is it what the orchestra's playing in the background, the dark? Because when you listen to that, you think, that's also a melody, or as much of a melody as the melody is. So I hope I'm making sense. So what he's done is he's showing us all the tiny little bits, just bits at a time, and it will all come and sort of fuse together in one whole. And by the end of the 25 minutes or whatever it is, you'll sit back and go, wow. Now, it might take a little time to get used to. You might need to hear it 2 or 3 times. And it might be an idea to play just the first movement for the beginning, and then the second movement on its own, and then the third movement on its own, which is rather short, about 3.5, 4 minutes, and then the fourth movement on its own, until you get all the little bits and you get familiar with these sounds. Because if or when Jean Sibelius stepped out of his house in Anola in Finland, is what his name of the house was, he would step out into a beautiful forest. I've been there, I've seen it for myself, and there were lakes not so far away, and he would walk off and he would hear nature. And what do we hear in nature? Just like Beethoven loved hearing nature. We hear a bird singing, we hear a noise, we hear a sound, we hear this. We don't hear a melody with a pa background. And so what he's done in the 6th Symphony is brought the sounds of nature together in a way that makes sense and is natural and yet sounds beautiful. I think he described it something like as being like clear water, but it's a big departure. And maybe even it was so radical that maybe he hadn't yet even formed himself what he was actually doing. It may have been a sort of semi-conscious thing. Okay, so I think we should start by playing you some pieces. So the first movement is the Allegro, Molto, moderato. So fast, not so fast. Take it moderately. And we're going to start with an Estonian conductor, Paavo Järvi. Now, Järvi is how the Americans pronounce it. I always get into trouble in the comments for how I pronounce it. But it can also be Järvi, pronounced in Flemish. I think it's something like that, Järvi. But for now, I'm going to go Järvi, because that's also apparently an acceptable way of pronouncing his name. So Paavo Järvi, born in Estonia, spent most of his working career in the US. And we're going to open with his 2018 recording, Erato RCA, with the Orchestre de Paris. Now, it's a very quiet opening, so I might change the volume a little bit just so that we get a balance. I'm just playing it through our loudspeakers. Of course, you won't hear it at home quite how I'm hearing it, and the speakers are not in a conventional setup for this video. So forgive me, but let's just start. It starts very, very quietly in the strings. Okay. Now, this flowing cool water, I think we get an idea of that here. Now, for this kind of music, it's extremely demanding on the orchestra. These long woodwind notes, long string notes where the bows are running down, and they've got to keep everything pure and continual, and that flowing going. Very difficult indeed. And to make the music work, the conductors here have a lot of freedom because they can bring it, as you noticed, it got quieter and louder. I didn't change the volume, it just got quieter and louder, then came back up, then died down. Now the conductor's got to get his or her orchestra completely under control in order to get that to work. And the orchestra has got to be good enough to be able to do this. And it takes rehearsal and it takes practice. And I think a lot of conductors stay away from the sixth because it's so demanding, but it's so beautiful when it's right. Now, the next conductor I'm going to go for is Sir Simon Rattle with the Berlin Philharmonic, recorded in 2015. So what do we have with Simon Rattle? He's also recorded a full set of Sibelius with the City of Birmingham Orchestra. He conducted the Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra after Berglund left, and we'll come to Berglund again in a minute. So he, a real passionate lover of Sibelius. Now, a lot of people in the comments seem to hate him or criticize him, and he gets a lot of negative energy. I personally think it's totally, totally unjustifiable. Even if you don't like the person as a person, his work and what he performs and what he delivers is amazing. And we cannot forget that the Berlin Philharmonic, the members themselves voted him on again, or even for a second period, which was quite in his career. So he wasn't as unpopular as everyone makes out to be, but he seems to be a conductor that seems to attract negative criticism. Anyway, listen to how quiet and how delicate the opening is, and it shows you the majesty of the Berlin Philharmonic, how they're able to do this. he plays it so quietly, and that is one of the great things about a hi-fi system, whether you're wearing headphones or loudspeakers. I'm very lucky in this listening room. The acoustics aren't perfect, but they're good enough, but it's also very quiet, which means that you can play this very quiet. If you're in a concert hall live, they can't play it that quiet because then no one would hear it, because there's too much general noise from all those humans breathing in and out and burping or whatever they do in the concert halls, or noise of things going on outside. You can never get it silent. But in the comfort of our homes, we can really appreciate that. Now, I'm going to move on to another Paavo Järvi, with the Orchestra de Paris, the Paavo Järvi, sorry, another Paavo Berglund's coming soon, forgive me. It's the Orchestra de Paris, and I'm going to come from where the first horn comes in. Take a listen to this. A horn player having to play Sibelius, having to come in on that note, be perfect. No, everyone's listening to you. You get it wrong. Everybody knows. Violinist, second violinist gets it wrong, comes in a little bit too late. No one's going to notice. Horn players, oh, I don't know how they do it. So you might think, as you heard that little ding, 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 at the end, a little theme, new theme coming in. If you see all these tiny little fragments coming together, all these different fragments, it does. Someone says to me once, "Oh, it sounds like film music," and I said, "Well, it's written between 1918 and 1919 up to, and was first performed in 23." Silent movies, I mean, the talkies, I don't think they came out until the 1920s, mid-20s. So the film music, you might have had some pianists and stuff playing music, but the concept of this big scope, this landscape, this Finland, if you've ever been there, with these huge fjords and lakes and forests and the mist rolling off across these big landscapes. This is what he's describing. This is what it is. And that is what a lot of people in movies use to get that sense of scale and space, especially in scenes in the open air and nature. So if that's what it sounds like to you, well, maybe Sibelius is painting the world outside his home well. Okay, we're going to stay with Järvi, because we're just going to move a little bit further into this first movement, and listen to the pace that he's taking this at, and the bright textures. It's all about sort of a post-impressionism with all these little textures and colours and ideas. You see what I mean about, excuse me, see what I mean about all those different images? You just see a little bit, da, 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 all different things coming together. Now, trust me, when you listen to it all on its own, certainly by the second listening, it will all make sense. But hopefully it's a beautiful experience. It's a little bit strange hearing it all cut up like this, but I want to introduce you nonetheless. Now we're going to go back to Simon Rattle, or Sir Simon, I'm supposed to say. Notice here, and this is similar part, he's taking a slower pace. He's got this molto moderato, and he's got lots of subtle volume changes, indeed like Järvi, but it's something typical in a really good performance of Sibelius. You'll hear that in the Järvi, in the Sibelius, and in most of the conductors that I've chosen. Here we go. Changing the volume constantly, bringing it up, dropping it down, bringing it up, dropping it down, to give that sort of lilting feeling. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite Paavo Järvi to the podium to take us to the end of the first movement, and we're entering into quite a dark phase of this, and you'll hear the sort of growling sort of sounds he's getting out of the lower strings. And you'll hear the quite sinister sounding. I have to say, it's at the time of recording, nearly Halloween here, and I can imagine it makes me feel that this is the sort of the spookiness of we've got here. Well, that's the end of the first movement. I hope you're getting an idea of how this is constructed. It's a bit like, I suppose in many ways, looking at an abstract painting, which is beautiful to look at, lovely colours, lovely textures. And then the thing about this is that every time you listen to this, you will always hear something new. And also one conductor there's a little harp entry that we just heard there before, and in some versions or performances you hardly hear it at all, and others it's a big bring, bring, and to say, here I am. So, but even if you just listen to the same recording over and over again, and I grew up with the Lorin Maazel on Decca, you still discover things that you didn't notice, the things that are happening in the shade, the things that are happening in the background. So, okay, we're going to move now on to the second movement, and I'm going to bring a Finnish conductor onto the podium, Santtu-Matias Rouvali, and he's going to open for us the opening Allegro moderato, which is the second movement. He's conducting the Gothenburg Symphony Orchestra. It's on Alpha Classics without their music. I love that label. The quality of recordings are fantastic. The Rattle is well recorded. You heard that the Järvi appears to be like a live recording, or you hear the orchestra at least. But this is released in 2024, so it's very modern. It's got a crisp, natural sound. And the excellent recording by Jor Hallgren is the engineer, and Lars Nilsson did the mixing and mastering. So it's really well recorded. So that's a bonus for us all, isn't it? Here we go. The opening of the second movement. Yeah, a great recording. You need to hear Rouvali's the whole thing to appreciate exactly what he's doing here. But I'm going to take you now further in, and we're going to switch to Herbert von Karajan, the Austrian conductor. Although I think it was Sir Thomas Beecham who recorded the symphony first, and Beecham and Sibelius knew each other and were good friends apparently. I think if it wasn't for Karajan, we may well have lost Sibelius altogether, because he really brought it to the table and made it famous and put it into all of the concert halls. And he recorded all the symphonies, a lot of the works. The only symphony he didn't record is number 3. For some strange reason, he never recorded number 3. But anyway, let's go to Herbert von Karajan and the Philharmonia Orchestra. getting the picture now. This is a very complicated symphony. There's lots of different things. And as soon as you think, oh, the melody's coming and we've got this sort of chorale going on, haven't we? A little bit of sort of Bach thing going with the sort of little, it's not a fugue, of course, but the sort of feeling. And no sooner that you think you're getting there, then suddenly another theme comes along or another rhythm begins, and the conductor's got to get all this under control, and they've got to decide which bits they're going to emphasize the most, where they're going to shine the light on. And that's why it can change so much, just like looking at a landscape on a sunny day with clouds and the wind blowing, and then the light changes constantly and the hills come nearer and further and everything in front of you changes. Sibelius is doing this in music, and I think it's marvelous. So obviously now I'm going to really put the cat amongst the pigeons. For the Americans, this is something they will recognize, of course. It's Leonard Bernstein. I have to say the Karajan version was his 1955 recording. This is 1968. This is Bernstein coming onto the Sibelius thing. He also recorded, I think, all the Sibelius symphonies, and certainly he was a big Sibelius fan. And you know why? Because it's so great to conduct. And if you've got the orchestra with you, it's a joyous, joyous experience. Let's just go to a similar section, but notice the difference. This massive sound that Bernstein always brings to the table. Two more different interpretations you couldn't ask for. Now, have you noticed also going through, you often hear this sort of scale, da, 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 this scale, ascending scales. It is an interesting note. I find it interesting, forgive me if you don't, that whilst he was writing the Sixth Symphony, he was also writing the Seventh. And the Seventh is his last symphony, the last symphony he ever wrote. I don't know if he knew it was going to be his last symphony, but it was. And it's like everything he's done has led up to this point, and there's nothing more he can do, and he has nothing more to say, which is quite understandable. And it starts in a scale, I think C, just a rising scale, the whole orchestra. And we've got this scale here. And it was Sir Simon Rattle that woke me up to this when I was given by my late mother the box set of the Sibelius symphonies for Christmas or my birthday. The later version from 2015 from Simon Rattle and Berlin Philharmonic. And he was reading the notes, and he was explaining in the notes about how they were written in parallel. I didn't know that. And he tries in that box set an experiment live of playing the Sixth Symphony and then running straight into the Seventh, because the Seventh is effectively one movement, although technically you can say it's three, but it's played in one piece. And it's rather short, about 20 minutes. And he just went straight into it, and it fits perfectly. You can try that actually, just play the Seventh after the Sixth. But I have to say, it makes the whole thing rather long, and you've got to be really focused and have the energy to follow, because great music like this asks energy, it asks concentration. It's not background music. You need to sit, listen, close your eyes and engage with what's going on in order to get the most out of it, I believe. Now, we're going to go to another composer, Klaus Mäkelä. And Klaus Mäkelä, a Finnish composer, born in 1996. Can you believe this? 1996, the guy is so young. Again, we're about 3 minutes in. He's got the Oslo Philharmonic, and it's recorded on Decca. And as always, Decca, fantastic recording quality. From, I believe it's 22. Just have a listen to this. Incredible. I mean, I'm bringing a lot of Finnish conductors in because they're brought up with this music. They've been hearing it on the radio, in the concert hall, in their classrooms since the moment they were born. And the orchestras they're playing with the Oslo, okay, it's not Finnish, obviously it's a Norwegian orchestra, but they would have been completely immersed in Sibelius's music from the very beginning. So we can expect the best. It's a bit like going to the US to hear Aaron Copland performed. You would imagine that you would get a very, very mature performance, and you have to take it seriously in the sense that these people know it better than anyone else. It's in their blood, it's in their DNA. And so whatever they're doing, you can kind of understand that this is a sincere thing. So anyway, that is Klaus Mäkelä and the Oslo Philharmonic. But I'm going to go back to Bernstein to ask him to finish the second movement, and hopefully you'll understand why. Wonderful. I love it. Whew, here we go. Now we are on to the third movement, Poco vivace. A little bit quick. Vivace is fast, but Poco. So I'm going to bring Santtu-Matias Rouvali back onto the stage with the Gothenburg Symphony Orchestra and ask him to open the third movement. Oh, fabulous. It's a shame I have to keep stopping. I think copyright would not allow it anyway. So now I'm going to move to the Paavo I confused earlier on in the talk. Paavo Berglund, born in 1929. Now, why do I say that? Because it just gives you an idea that this is an older person who, again, Finnish. And just interesting to see the contrast here. He had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless with orchestras, an absolute perfectionist. He would come to every rehearsal, every concert fully prepared, and he would write lots and lots of notes and study everything inside out. So he should, but he would also write lots of notes for every musician in the orchestra about what he wanted and what he needed from them. So very little room for maneuver for the orchestra. What he wanted was what he got. But he built an international reputation of doing wonders for orchestras and bringing them to that level. And he brought the Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra, I can't say from nowhere because that would be rude, but he brought it to an international level. Incredible. So I see him a bit like a coach and a trainer of a football coach or a sports coach, where you really can push and push and push, and then the team ends up winning and achieving a standard they never knew or thought possible, even if the process might be a little uncomfortable. So this is a 1976 recording with the Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra. Have a listen to this. Slower, of course. Now, after the Rouvali, you might be forgiven for thinking, well, this is a bit tedious. It's nothing. It's just and nothing really happening. Not a lot of colour. But if you stick with the Berglund, you get it. It's really, really good if you listen to the whole symphony, because you realise he's actually just holding everything back and just letting it float across and letting the music doing. He's not using dramatics like Bernstein and Rouvali are doing. The recording is a little bit narrow. It's not as good as the more modern recordings. Fine tonally, it's just there's not so much atmosphere in the hall. We've got used to that these days. Let's go on to Berglund. I'm going to stick with him, Paavo Berglund again, because I think this actually, the control he has here may convince you to give him a chance and listen to at least one whole movement of him conducting this work. It's understated. Everything is understated and clean and worth a listen. Let's go to Rouvali. Let's bring him back onto the stage, onto the podium to say, take us to the end. And what a dramatic ending it is. See how he handles this. embarrassing. Just earlier on in that clip, the sound he gets from the trumpets, that's just great. Often you don't get that clarity. I mean, sitting here in front of, I know, the loudspeakers that I designed and built, it just makes me think my life's work has been worthwhile when I hear the trumpets coming in there. It's just, wow. I'm in the concert hall with them. Fabulous. Hope you're enjoying this. We're now moving onto the fourth movement, of course, the fourth and final movement of this work. And we're going to bring, obviously, Klaus Markela back on to the podium, because we haven't heard much from him, to be fair, with the Oslo Symphony Orchestra. And he opens with which I call a prayer. It's very much this message, this feeling, this emotion that Sibelius is so good at portraying. You'll find that into the part of the Karelia suite and you're coming back in the early works, this sense of everything's going to be fine. And bearing in mind he's writing this after the First World War, terrible times. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful, but still in this fragmented pieces coming together to form a picture. Here we go. I find it amazing how someone so young, what is he, 28, 29 when he's recording this, conducting the orchestra, can get so much out of an orchestra. Listen, did you hear the colour and the sound of the lower strings, the detail, the phrasing that he gets? And the fact that they must respect him to listen and play together so well. It's really, really impressive. Now, back to Paavo Järvi and the Orchestra de Paris. Notice very similar approach, to be honest. It's not a million miles away, and we would expect it to be so. But notice the timing and phrasing here. It's just subtly different. Incredible how it's so difficult, that phrase, bada pom pom pom. And if you listen to how Markela did it, he put a little accent in just in the middle to give it a bit of weight to come down. But Järvi, he just glides it over the waves. No one is better, it's just different, and I love them both. Okay, back to Klaus Markela now. And moving a bit further in, I call it a tempo, where this movement is building up to a new tempo. Yeah, fantastic. This always kind of reminds me, probably because of the pizzicato in the strings and the rhythmic structure. It always kind of reminds me of a sleigh ride and sort of rushing through the snow in between the pine trees or something. I don't know. That's just my imagination. I'm sure you have your own. Let's go back to Paavo Järvi and ask him to, just taking in, listen out here for the warm tone he's getting from the orchestra. I originally wrote in my notes the warm tone of the recording engineer. I thought, silly me, no, the recording engineer is just doing his job or her job. It's Järvi is getting this sound out of the orchestra. It's also room acoustics can also have a big thing to play. Here there's a little bit of a nasally sound, a little bit, especially where the microphones are to get the stereo sound. You can't really get away with that. So in this hall with this orchestra, with the sound he gets a lovely warm rich tone, and I think it works well with this piece. Listen. You get the sense, don't you, that we're moving somewhere, we're moving to an ending. But how will that ending be? Well, for the ending, to take us to the end, I've chosen Sir Simon Rattle. Why? Because I think he's playing it and performing it in a way that is correct. I don't think I really do dislike it when people say, oh, it shouldn't be played that and it must be played that. No, what I mean is taking in all the knowledge, all the recordings that he's seen and heard and all the performances and studying like he does, and thinking, okay, I don't want to do anything that is too extreme or exaggerated. I want to be true to the composer, and I think he's doing it really, really well here. Again, it's not exciting, it's just wonderful. And I think sometimes I think that's what's needed with Sibelius. I have all of these recordings on CD, and I wouldn't want to part with any of them, because depending what mood I'm in, I will choose one over another. And by choosing one over another, not only do I enjoy that one, but it also reminds me of the wonderful elements that are in the others as well. That's the great thing about classical music. It doesn't have to be Bernstein's recording or Marzel's Decca recording. It can be all of them. It can be whatever mood you're in. That is the beauty of it. So here we go to finish this. Well, if you have been, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video. Enjoy the music.